Good Erev Shabbos. I'd like to share with you a thought this afternoon that I picked up from Rabbi Safran of the OU of the Orthodox Union. He shares an interesting observation about the kosher animals that are mentioned in this week's Parsha, specifically the fish. Pointing out how the signs of kashrus for fish, as you know, are just fins and scales. They don't need to be shechted. They just need to be caught. And we understand that fish are more spiritual somehow than the land animals. It seems that, the land animals were involved in all sorts of stuff that when the flood came had to wipe them out, whereas fish maintained their integrity and their purity and were saved. They weren't destroyed in the flood. And the Talmud teaches that all fish that have scales have fins and are kosher. But there are fish that have fins that don't have scales. And there's a couple of interesting questions. Why do you need two characteristics then? If all fish that have scales have fins, then shouldn't it be enough to just have scales? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory, suggested that you need both characteristics because the scales act like a kind of armor, an armor that protects the body of the fish, and it's that quality of insularness, it's a quality of integrity, it protects us from the many pitfalls that life presents. And fins are like the limbs that propel one forward and allow for the fish to get places, sort of suggestive of ambition. So together you've got integrity, i.e. the scales, and ambition, the fins. And we know, just like there are non-kosher fish that have fins and don't have scales, we know that there are people that have lots of ambition, but they don't have the requisite integrity. And ambition without integrity is just selfishness. Integrity is important, but integrity itself isn't enough. Our scales shield us and they protect us. And the Talmud points out that the comparison, they compare it to Yiras Shamayim, to fear of Hashem. That gives us a kind of protection. That without Yiras Shamayim, without that kind of fear of God, everything that one does and tries to achieve in life is very easily threatened. There's no bitachon. There's no sense of security. So it's the scales, not the fins, which actually ultimately determine if the fish is kosher or not. But while Yiras Shamayim, the fear of heaven, the scales, will in and of themselves make for a good and pious Jew, it's not enough alone to be able to achieve in life what we were put here to achieve. For that we need the fins as well. We need to propel ourselves forward. In fact, the Talmud goes even further by suggesting that if a fish is swimming upstream, it's by definition a kosher fish. Implying, of course, that a fish that's unable to swim upstream is not. Isn't that a powerful message? Talmud is teaching us that any fish that swims upstream is kosher. It's telling us something about the deep holiness of moving against the current. That characteristic, that ability to move against the current is the secret to our survival as a people. In Genesis, God blesses the fish when he creates him, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas." Just as fish are seen as a symbol of fertility. And we also have a mandate to be fruitful and multiply. And when Jacob is blessing Ephraim and Manasseh at the end of his life, at the end of the book of Genesis, he says, "V'yidgu l'roiv b'kerev ha'aretz," they should grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And the word that he uses for to multiply is v'yidgu, which means that they should swarm like fish. Fins and scales, those define the kosher characteristics of fish. But there's so much more to fish that instructs the Jew. The Talmud considers the argument that fish that can't fight the rapids, that can't swim upstream like that, don't have a spinal cord. So they can't exist in the rapidly flowing waters and are carried away by the current. They're spineless, they're without strength. To overcome such currents, you have to have a spine. It's that spine, it's that courage and strength which allows one to move in the right direction and to be able to stand up for what is truly right and noble. To dream the impossible dream and to fight the unbeatable foe. To fight for the right without question or pause. To be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause, as it says in the Man of La Mancha. And we know, if we'll only be true to that glorious quest, that the world will be better for this. And in every turn, in every generation, we've had to face that in history. And we haven't let ourselves be swept away. We swam. And we continue to exist and to thrive today, both nationally in the state of Israel, and individually in the face of what we have to go through in life. Not in spite of the currents that have tried to overcome us, but actually because of them. Avram was known as Avram HaIvri, Avram the Hebrew, but the word Ha'ivri literally means over on the other side. And we've discussed this before. Avram, the first Jew, was on one side, and the rest of the world was on the other side of morality, the other side of monotheism. He swam very much against the current. The world said one thing, and Avram's faith in the one God said another, and he didn't insist on floating comfortably with the current. He resisted, he swam against the harsher and the harder current. It's not the way of the Jew to go with the flow. For 2,000 years, in the course of a very long exile, we've swum and we swam, fighting against the world's currents. We stayed kosher as a nation and as a people, and as individuals. And now, on a more personal level, I suppose, how often have our individual dreams been challenged or broken or faced adversity? How many times have life's surprises thwarted plans that we've had? How many have had their businesses, their homes, their life plans messed up because of this COVID crisis that we're going through? How many are seeing hopes and dreams that they had totally messed about? It's hard. On a more us community-focused idea, it's hard to contemplate returning to shul. There's a definite fear factor. And it's absolutely imperative to make sure scales are in order, right? To put on those scales of masks and sanitization and social distancing and all the rules and regulations of the protocols. But we need fins. We need to explore our fins as well. And we need to give thought to, with God's help, moving forward. And it will take courage. And I'm not recommending that anybody do anything foolish. But we are exploring the opportunity to recongregate, and to regroup. And it is hard. But we're Jews. Like fish, we've got scales, we got fins, we got spines, and we can swim against the harsh tide. We can swim against the adversity. Our parsha starts off with the words, "See, I'm placing before you a blessing." And it oftentimes happens that those blessings that come to us are initially disguised as challenges. But we'll rise to the occasion. Vayidgu. We must grow and thrive even in the face of the greatest adversity. I wish you a Shabbos of empowerment and a Shabbos of blessing. Shabbos Mevorchim, where we come to meet the month of Elul and to give it its blessings, that we should be led, please God, safely and healthily into a new year. Shabbat Shalom.